Eliza Moore, a famous judge, strict but fair, 45 years old, has been working in the judiciary for over 20 years. Eliza is known for her toughness in cases and her passion for justice. However, inside she always carries the pain from the past when she lost her son to kidnapping when he was young. One day, a prisoner was brought to trial in court with Eliza Moore as the main judge. It was a day like any other in Eliza's career, with a series of cases to handle. She has always been known for her seriousness, impartiality, and outstanding ability to control her emotions, not letting any personal factors affect her judgment. Today's court session is no exception. The prisoner's name is Marcus, a man in his 30s with a cold and quiet appearance, accused of being involved in an armed robbery. Eliza maintained her usual calm demeanor, paying attention to the case file and listening to the arguments. But when Marcus entered the courtroom, something changed. From the moment he first appeared, Eliza could not take her eyes off Marcus's face. Her gaze swept quickly, then stopped at the birthmark on his forehead, a birthmark not too large, but distinct and distinctive. She recognized it immediately. It was the same birthmark as the son she had lost many years ago. Confusion, shock, and doubt filled Eliza's mind. Her heart raced, her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly regained her composure, hiding all her emotions behind a calm, cold face. She told herself that it could just be a coincidence. Marcus could not possibly be her son. It had been years since her son was kidnapped, and she had spent her whole life searching for him, but to no avail. Long nights of crying, crushed hopes, had almost made her give up on the idea that she would ever see him again. However, looking at that birthmark, all the memories and pain came flooding back. Eliza continued to conduct the trial with absolute professionalism. She listened to every statement from the lawyers, the prosecutor, and Marcus' defense. Throughout the process, she tried not to let her emotions get the better of her, but sometimes her eyes would involuntarily wander to him. Marcus's words, even the most ordinary ones, haunted Eliza. She searched for a sign, something that could indicate that he was her son. The way Marcus answered, the expression on his face, and even the smallest gestures became the object of her observation. Marcus had no idea that the judge standing before him could be his own mother. For him, this trial was just another step in a life full of hardships and challenges. Marcus stood there, not noticing Eliza's eyes that were secretly following him. Eliza noticed that Marcus had a deep sadness in his eyes, something only a mother could recognize in her son. Questions rushed through her mind. How could she be sure? If he really was her son, why was he in this situation? How had Marcus lived all these years? The courtroom became tense as Eliza and Marcus faced each other. No one in the courtroom could understand the quiet tension that permeated this small space. Marcus, just one defendant in the dozens of cases Eliza has handled, sees nothing special about the judge standing before him. But Eliza's eyes, full of pain and sorrow, made him feel uncomfortable, as if something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, Eliza could not take her eyes off Marcus. Every gesture, every word he spoke evoked in her the image of her long-lost son. Marcus stood there, his hands cuffed in front of him, his head bowed, listening to the accusations, but occasionally looking up. He caught Eliza's eyes looking at him. There was a strange warmth in those eyes, but also full of pain, as if she were trying to understand him from a completely different perspective. The silent confrontation between the two made the atmosphere in the courtroom stifling, every word and action heavy with suppressed emotions. Eliza tried to maintain her professionalism. She continued to conduct the trial with a strong and determined voice, but her heart ached. Every time she looked at Marcus, she saw a shadow of the son she had lost. The way he bit his lip when he was nervous, the tired but hopeful look in his eyes, and the faint smile that flickered when he heard the lawyer's questions, all of it reminded Eliza of her son. She remembered the last day she saw him before he was kidnapped, his innocent smile and hopeful eyes. The pain of losing a child had never gone away, and now, standing before her, Marcus brought an inexplicable haunting. As Marcus continued to answer the lawyer's questions, Eliza realized that she was losing control. The emotions she had kept bottled up for so many years seemed to spill over. Marcus looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and in that moment, Eliza couldn't keep her composure. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Marcus saw the tears in the judge's eyes, but he didn't understand why. He could only sense some deep pain she was carrying. Marcus's tired eyes also held something like empathy, but he didn't know what it was, only that she seemed to understand him more than anyone else in the room. A painful memory came back to Eliza the day she lost her child, the day her world fell apart. She remembered the panic, the desperate searching, the sleepless nights. It was also the day she vowed never to let a criminal go unpunished. She promised herself to be a defender of justice, but she had never expected that justice would now bring her before someone who could be her own flesh and blood. During the trial, Marcus's attorney, Jack Thompson, began to present evidence that Marcus had been wrongly convicted. Jack painted a picture of an innocent man who had been dragged into the law by circumstances beyond his control. He presented a series of evidence that Marcus had not been present at the robbery and that the testimony of witnesses seemed to be fabricated. Jack attempted to paint Marcus as a victim of the system, a voiceless man who had been exploited by dark forces. Jack's arguments were convincing, but Eliza, with her years of experience as a judge, began to sense that something was amiss. The evidence presented in court seemed plausible, but when Eliza looked closely, she discovered irregularities. Some of the evidence seemed to have been carefully crafted. Jack's witnesses gave conflicting testimony, and Marcus's alibi came from dubious sources. Eliza decided not to let things slide easily. She called for an internal investigation to clarify the truth. This was not the first time Eliza had faced such a complicated case, but this time there was a different feeling, a feeling she could not ignore. Eliza began to dig into the files of Marcus and those involved. Through the investigation, she discovered that Jack Thompson was not the impartial lawyer he claimed to be. Some confidential documents showed that Jack had made a shady deal with a major gang in the city. The gang was involved in child trafficking and exploited them for a variety of illegal purposes, from forced labor to strangling cases to getting out of jail. Marcus, like many other children, had been drawn into this cycle since he was a child. Years of living under the control of the gang had turned him into a tool rather than a free man. Eliza was shocked when she discovered this truth. Memories of her kidnapped son came back to haunt her. She clearly remembered that day when her little son was taken away right before her eyes. She watched helplessly without being able to do anything. That incident haunted her for the rest of her life, motivating her to become a judge who was determined to fight crime. But now, when faced with Marcus and the truth that he could be the son she had been searching for all this time, Eliza did not know how to face it. This truth shocked her, as if her whole world had collapsed before her eyes. Eliza stood before the court not only as a judge but also as a mother in pain for her lost son. Marcus, the child who had been taken from her arms, now stood before her as a defendant. Marcus' years in the shadows, manipulated by evil men, had turned him into a man Eliza could not immediately recognize. But now, with the truth exposed, she realized how terrible things Marcus had endured. Eliza decided to meet Marcus privately in the interrogation room after the trial. When Eliza entered the interrogation room where Marcus was sitting, the air was thick with tension and suppressed emotions. This was a meeting that Eliza knew could change everything, but she also knew that she had to be careful with her words and actions. Before her, Marcus looked wary and uncomfortable, his eyes filled with confusion and fatigue. This was not just a meeting between a judge and a defendant, but between two people with intertwined pasts that they had not yet fully recognized. Eliza sat down across from Marcus, trying to maintain a calm exterior. She began the conversation by asking Marcus about his past, about what he remembered from his childhood. At first, Marcus seemed confused, not understanding why the judge was interested in such personal matters. But as Eliza continued to ask questions, memories he had tried to bury began to surface, faint but enough to drag him back to a time he had tried to forget. Marcus began to talk about his years of captivity, about the small, dark rooms he had lived in throughout his childhood. He remembered the suffocating and oppressive feeling, the long days with only loneliness as his companion. The people around him, the ones who had taken him away, were cold and unfeeling, treating him more like a commodity than a child. They cared nothing for him except to control and exploit him. Those were the days when Marcus felt trapped in a cage from which he could not escape. Eliza listened to every word Marcus said, her heart clenched as she realized how terrible her son had been. She tried to connect the fragments of memories Marcus was telling her with what she knew of his childhood. What Marcus remembers are not happy memories, but a series of dark and painful days. But in that jumble of memories, Marcus also mentioned a woman he vaguely remembered as a mother. Eliza almost choked up when Marcus described that woman. Although he couldn't remember her face or name clearly, he always felt a sense of familiarity and love whenever he thought of her. Marcus said that she often held him in her arms, told him stories, and sang him lullabies when he was very young. For Eliza, these details were like a key that opened the door to memories that had been locked for so many years. She remembered the time she sang lullabies to her child, the afternoon she took her child to play in the garden, and the simple moments that she thought would last forever. Now, those memories were not only hers, but also a part of the memories that Marcus kept deep in his heart, despite being overshadowed by many events. Marcus also told her about the last time he saw that woman, before he was taken away. He remembered the feeling of fear and despair when he was pulled away from her warm embrace. It was the last time he felt loved and protected, before his life took a dark turn. In the years that followed, Marcus lived as an invisible man, without a family, with no one to turn to. He tried to find that woman in his memory, but the fragments and omissions kept him from finding the answer. Eliza tried not to cry as Marcus recounted his painful experiences. Every word he said was like a knife carving deep into her heart. She wanted to hold him, wanted to tell him that she was the mother he was looking for, but Eliza knew that things couldn't be that simple. She still needed to prove that Marcus was her son, and most of all, she didn't want to scare or hurt him further. In addition to Marcus's pain, Eliza also had to face the conflict between her role as a judge and her responsibility as a mother. She knew that she couldn't let her emotions rule her judgment in this case, but she also couldn't ignore the truth that was gradually emerging. Marcus, without realizing it, was a part of her, the son she had lost during all those years of searching. Each story he told was like the last piece of the puzzle that completed the picture she had been trying to paint for so many years. Eliza also began to think about what she needed to do next to prove this truth. She knew that she couldn't rely on memory alone. She needed hard evidence, and she was willing to use every resource at her disposal to find it. She would review all documents, medical records, and contact witnesses from the past to connect the missing pieces. She wouldn't stop until she had enough evidence to bring Marcus back to his real family. Eliza spent days searching for evidence and piecing together the pieces of Marcus and his past. She turned over pages of files, from the time of Marcus's abduction to faint traces of gang activity in the area. She contacted colleagues, investigated previously overlooked clues, and gradually began to form a complete picture of the terrible truth that Marcus had gone through. During the investigation, Eliza was shocked to discover that Jack Thompson, Marcus's attorney, was much more than just a dedicated defender of his client. Jack has deep connections with a major criminal gang in the city, those behind the child trafficking operations and using them as tools in their illegal business. Marcus, from a very young age, has been controlled by this gang and turned into a pawn in their dark schemes. Jack used Marcus not only as a client, but also as a means to conceal the gang's crimes. Eliza was shocked to discover this truth. She could not believe that Jack, who was once considered a reputable lawyer, could be so deeply involved in such a terrible arrangement. The evidence Eliza collected showed that Jack had known about Marcus's situation from the beginning. Not only did he know that Marcus was a victim of the gang, but he also knew Marcus's origins, even knowing that he could be Eliza's kidnapped child. However, instead of helping Marcus escape the cycle of guilt, Jack used that information to create a shield to protect the gang and himself. When he learned the truth, Marcus fell into an uncontrollable rage. He felt betrayed by the person he trusted most in this difficult life. Jack not only used him as a tool, but also covered up the truth about his past, something Marcus had always longed to know. Feelings of anger, hurt, and despair mixed together, Marcus decided to confront Jack directly, demanding that he tell the whole truth. The confrontation between Marcus and Jack is tense. Marcus rushes at Jack, his eyes filled with anger. He demands answers from Jack. Why did he take advantage of Marcus's life, turning him into a pawn in a criminal game? Why did Jack not help him find his past, but instead do everything to keep Marcus trapped in this web of crime? Jack, cornered, initially tries to keep his cool, but under pressure from Marcus, he can no longer hide. Jack confesses that he only did what he thought was best for his client, but at the same time he knows that he has gone too far. Jack admits that he saw Marcus as an opportunity for personal gain, especially when he learned about Marcus' connection to Eliza. For Jack, helping Marcus is not just a job, but also a way to keep the secrets that the gang is hiding. He had hoped that by protecting Marcus, he would be able to keep the dark deals he and the gang had made. However, Jack did not foresee that his actions would push Marcus down a path that would destroy his life. The conflict between Marcus and Jack continued to escalate. Marcus felt like everything was a lie. He screamed in anger, demanding that Jack take responsibility for everything that had happened. But Eliza intervened in time, stepping between the two, asking Marcus to calm down and tell everything he knew. She knew that this confrontation was not just about the law, but also about Marcus having to face the terrible truth about his life. Eliza faced Jack. Her eyes were determined and uncompromising. She forced Jack to admit all the crimes, all the manipulations he had done. Jack knew that he could not hide from the truth any longer, especially when Eliza had undeniable evidence in her hands. Jack bowed his head, admitting that he had known who Marcus was all along but had chosen the selfish path to protect himself and the gang. Jack confesses that he knows Marcus is Eliza's son, kidnapped as a child and made a victim not only of the gang but also of the legal system Jack has exploited. He recognized Marcus from the signs and information he found during his investigation. Instead of returning Marcus to his mother, Jack kept that information secret, using Marcus as a bargaining chip and protecting the gang's hidden interests. Jack knew this was wrong, but he was caught in a cycle he could not escape. Eliza hears Jack's confession with anger and heartache. She has spent her life searching for Marcus, only to realize that the very people she trusted were part of the cover-up. Eliza understands that Jack was part of the corrupt system that victimized Marcus, but what hurts her most is how much Marcus was used. She knew that to bring things to light, she would have to fight to the end, not only to get justice for Marcus, but also to break the dark plot that had gone on for so long. Marcus stood before Eliza, his hands shaking, his eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, Marcus was no longer a prisoner, no longer a lost man in a stormy life. In front of Eliza, he was just a child who had lost his way home, carrying deep wounds in his soul. The pain that had been suppressed for so long was now released. Marcus could not hold back the tears that overflowed, rolling down his cheeks. They were tears of regret, of pain, and also of a fragile hope. Eliza, with tears in her eyes, could not control her emotions. Her heart broke when she saw the son she had spent so many years searching for. She walked towards Marcus, gently took his hand, feeling the weakness and hurt hidden there. The warmth of her son's hand seemed to awaken the beautiful memories she once had, but at the same time, it also evoked the pain of the lost years. Life had been too harsh for both mother and son, full of challenges and losses. But now, at this moment, they had found each other. Marcus bowed his head, chokingly apologizing to Eliza. He wasn't apologizing for the wrongdoings he'd done, but for the pain he'd unintentionally caused her over the years. Marcus knew he couldn't turn back time, couldn't erase the sadness Eliza had endured, but he wanted her to know that he'd always longed for a family, a mother he could rely on. Marcus' remorse is not only for himself but also for all that he has lost since he was drawn into the cycle of sin. Eliza, with a heart full of maternal love, decides to rebuild Marcus' life. She is not only a judge who delivers justice, but also a mother who is willing to protect her lost child. She knows that the past cannot be changed, but she also believes that the future still has hope. Eliza is determined to help Marcus escape the darkness that has haunted him all his life, help him find himself and start a new journey. She promises herself that she will always be by his side, as a protective and loving mother, making up for what they both missed. Eliza spends a lot of time working with lawyers and authorities, fighting for Marcus to have a chance to rebuild his life. She clearly presents Marcus's situation, what he has been through, and how the gang has exploited him. She stressed that Marcus was not the mastermind, but a victim of a cruel system that pushed him to the brink. Eliza understood that forgiveness was not easy for everyone, but she believed in change and in the human ability to start over. Throughout the investigation and trial, Eliza was always by Marcus's side, supporting and encouraging him not to give up. Marcus, despite his many fears and obsessions from the past, felt the strength of his mother's love. He began to learn to trust others, to learn to face the pain instead of running away. Little by little, Marcus began to change, no longer a lost person, but a person who wanted to rebuild his life from the broken pieces. Ended with a humane sentence, giving Marcus a chance to start his life over. Eliza and Marcus were determined to rebuild their lost mother-son relationship, starting from zero, with the hurt but also with full hope for the future.